WADR, promoting dialogue.
It's 6 p.m. in Dakar, 7 p.m. in Lagos. Good evening, and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and worldwide on WADR.org. This is Newslink. First, our major stories. The Nigerian army neutralizes a terrorist commander and several insurgents in the Lake Chad area. The Supreme Court in Mali rejects an appeal filed by political parties contesting their dissolution. Reaction trails the election of a new president of the African Development Bank.
A unique election by the fact that I would say the underdog was the winner at the end. Unique election because also he won in a very wide margin.
And the Togolese government announces mid-July for the controversial municipal elections after strong political opposition. Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
Here is Abdullahi Hassan with Newslink.
Glad to have you join us on this edition of Newslink. Let's get started in Nigeria, where several insurgents plaguing the northeast and Lake Chad Basin were neutralized in the early hours of today. They were eliminated by the Nigerian army during an operation by its special forces against Boko Haram and its offshoot, the Islamic State in West Africa, ISWAP. In a statement by the Nigerian army, Amir Abu Fatima, a wanted senior ISWAP commander, was also hit in the precision strike carried out as part of Operation Hadinkai in the Kukawa axis in Borno State. Imoradet completes the story.
According to a statement, the operation was based on intelligence deemed credible and specifically targeted Abu Fatima, a high-ranking commander considered one of the masterminds of recurring attacks in the Lake Chad Basin. He was the subject of a 100 million naira, about $63,000 bounty for his capture, alive or dead. The Nigerian Armed Forces said during an intense exchange of fire, Abu Fatima was fatally wounded. His direct deputy, several explosives experts, and several other fighters were also neutralized. The soldiers recovered several AK-47 assault rifles, magazines, and ammunition of various calibers, and materials for making improvised explosive devices, IEDs, from the scene. The statement noted that no Nigerian soldiers were injured during the operation. This strike, described as a major success by the Nigerian military, represents a significant setback for jihadist groups active in the northeast of the country. It is part of a series of targeted operations aimed at dismantling the command structures of Boko Haram and its rival faction, the Islamic State in West Africa, ISWAP. Nigerian military adds in a statement that this action reinforces its unwavering commitment to restoring peace in the northeast.
Imoradet with that report. Still in Nigeria, the Niger State Disaster Management Agency said a search operation is ongoing for missing flood victims in Mokwa local government area of the state. The agency informed that long hours of rainfall on Wednesday night in the state resulted in flooding, which caused heavy material damage and loss of lives. More than 50 homes were washed away and nearly 60 people confirmed killed in the disaster, while 3 others, a mother and her 2 children, were rescued alive. They are currently receiving medical attention for injuries sustained in the incident. Experts say the number of casualties in Niger State is a stark reminder and a call to action by the federal government to mitigate flooding disaster in the 2025 rainy season. In March, the Nigerian Ministry of Water Resources issued an alert which said 31 of 36 states of the Federation face dangers of flooding this year. In Mali, the Supreme Court has rejected the appeals of political parties against their dissolution by the military authorities on May 13. Leaders of the political parties had appealed to the Apex Court and several other courts just over a week ago. These appeals aimed to challenge the legality of the presidential decree dissolving the political parties. These courts declared themselves, and I quote, incompetent. More on judicial matters, the Constitutional Court of Benin has rejected requests filed by defense lawyers in the case involving Olivier Boko and Oswald Homeke. The two men are former close associates of President Patrice Talon. Their lawyers had petitioned the court to challenge the procedure adopted by the Court for the Repression of Economic Offences and Terrorism, otherwise known as CREAT, to try them. Francis Boniface reports.
In their petition, the lawyers for Olivia Boko and Oswald Omeki accused the CREAT judges of violating the Constitution and the rights of defense. They argued that the judges had dismissed the referral of the proceedings to trial without considering the observations and asserted in their decision that the defense lawyers had not submitted any briefs. In response, the judges stated that the appeals were inadmissible, arguing that in collegiate matters, no individual judge bears responsibility for the rendered decisions. They also claimed they had not received any observations or objections regarding unconstitutionality within the required time limits. Upon reviewing the matter, the Constitutional Court deemed the petitions admissible on the merits. However, it found no evidence that the judges had received the constitutional objection within the specified time frames, which is a necessary condition for a ruling. As a result, the court dismissed the argument, alleging a violation of the Constitution. Regarding a second appeal brought by Ayodele Ahonu, the court declared its lack of jurisdiction, stating that it had already ruled on the inadmissibility of the objection raised. Olivier Boko and Oswald Omeki were sentenced in January to 20 years in prison for conspiracy against state security. The two former close associates of President Patrice Talon are accused of attempting to recruit a military official to organize a coup d'etat.
A report by WADR's Cotonou correspondent Aziz Adam Swiley and voiced by Francis Boniface.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
As a reminder, we are worldwide on wadr.org and on Facebook, WADR English Service. The Togolese government has postponed the municipal elections to July 2025. This decision was communicated in a decree adopted by the President of the National Council for Yatsingbe. In alignment with the directive, the Independent National Electoral Commission (CENI) also announced the suspension of a recent decree that increased the number of municipal councillors and deputy mayors that are to be elected. Christopher Ticho has more in the following report.
A new decree signed by the President of the Council for Nyatsingbe stated that municipal elections will be held on July 17. The decree specifies that members of the Togolese Armed Forces, Security Forces, Paramilitary Forces and the Operational Reserve, who are called upon to ensure the security of voters and electoral operations on Election Day, are authorized to cast their vote on Monday, July 14, which is 72 hours before the official election date. The election campaign will run from midnight on July 1 to 11:59 p.m. on July 15. Additionally, the recently adopted decree that aimed to increase the number of municipal councillors has been suspended. The decision was made by the Independent National Electoral Commission (CENI). As a result, the number of councillors to be elected will remain the same as during the 2019 municipal elections, totaling 1,527. The President has also announced that the deadline for submitting application files, initially set for Thursday, May 29, 2025, has been extended to Sunday, June 1, 2025 at 11:59 p.m. It is important to note that the recent calls from opposition members have requested the postponement of the municipal elections to allow for better preparation.
A report by WADR's Lome correspondent Silvio Ouedraogo and presented by Christopher Aticho. Now, several individuals, including state officials in the Gambia, have been summoned by a legislative inquiry committee over the sale of properties of former President Yahya Jammeh. The committee has a mandate of 120 days and is scheduled to begin public hearings in early July. The investigation will focus on the handling, legality, and transparency of the asset transactions. Later action will be based on recommendations from the findings of the National Assembly Committee. For more on this, let's join Sankule Janko.
According to the media sources, the identified witnesses include former Attorney General and Minister of Justice Abubakar Tambedu, former High Court Sheriff Tabali, and Alhaji Mamadi Kurang, former Executive Secretary of the Jana Commission, who has confirmed his summon in a social media post. The committee is tasked with examining the list of assets identified by the Jana Commission. It will determine which assets were sold, transferred, or otherwise disposed of, as well as the legal and administrative processes used in these sales and the authority under which they occurred. Additionally, the committee will assess the valuation, pricing, and procurement methods used to establish asset values and will identify and profile the purchasers of these assets to evaluate whether proper procedures were followed. Furthermore, the committee will review the management and accounting of the proceeds generated from the asset sales and verify whether the funds were properly disposed into public accounts. It has the authority to recommend that the Inspector General of Police open investigations against any individual or entity if discrepancies or fraudulent activities are discovered during the inquiry. This investigation aims to reveal corruption, conflicts of interest, and a lack of due process in the sale of assets belonging to former President Yahya Jammeh, who has been in exile since 2017. As a reminder, several young protesters were arrested during demonstrations in which they were demanding accountability for the sale of the ex-president's assets. In response to these demands, current President Adama Barrow, in a recent state address, promised to implement the findings from investigations that would be conducted by the Office of the Auditor General and the National Assembly regarding the sales of his predecessor's assets.
Sankule Janko reporting from Banjul. Senegalese Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko is currently in the Ivorian economic hub Abidjan on a 3-day official visit. Sonko's visit is part of the relaunch of bilateral cooperation between Senegal and Côte d'Ivoire. Ousmane Sonko was received by his Ivorian counterpart Robert Begrimambi on Thursday. He also met with the new African Development Bank President Sidi Outa. This is the second regional trip by the Senegalese head of government in May, following his recent visit to Burkina Faso. The trip helped strengthen bilateral cooperation, particularly on the free movement of goods via the port of Dakar and the establishment of a representation of the Burkina Faso Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Senegal, among other issues. And just before the break, let's take you to Guinea, where tensions are rising between the state authorities and the UAE mining company known as Guinea Alumina Corporation. The stalemate revolves around the ongoing construction of a refinery in the country. Recently, Guinean authorities ordered a halt to bauxite exports from the Boke mine operated by GAC. The situation follows a statement from General Amara Kamara, the official spokesperson of the Guinean presidency, who highlighted a breach of contractual commitment by the mining company.
GAC, in accordance with its basic agreement, was supposed to develop a refinery here in Guinea. 20 years later, no refinery has been built. In relation to its commitments, nothing. Our bauxite is still being processed. A refinery that was supposed to be built in Guinea has been built elsewhere. That is where our bauxite is refined. There is no Guinean working there. This is our land. When you look at the tax conditions that were granted to GAC to allow for the development of that refinery, it is extraordinary. A formal notice has been sent to GAC. The notice is ongoing. In the end, the state will take its responsibilities. But from now on, no one will take advantage of Guinea for our resources, especially not on our own land.
General Amara Kamara is the official spokesperson for the Guinean presidency. The UAE mining company, Guinea Alumina Corporation, denies any breach of its contractual obligations and in turn accuses the Guinean government of having implemented measures since October 2024 that violate the Republic of Guinea's contractual and international commitments. The company also calls for negotiations to reach a consensus. You are listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. We are live on wadr.org. Here's a reminder of our top stories. The Nigerian army neutralizes a terrorist commander and several insurgents in the Lake Chad area. The Supreme Court in Mali rejects an appeal filed by political parties contesting their dissolution. Reaction 3, the election of a new president of the African Development Bank. And we also told you that the Togolese government has announced mid-July for the controversial municipal elections after strong political opposition. Still ahead in the news, we have the guest interview and sports news. Please stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Many thanks for staying with us. To news on economy. Ghana is positioning itself as a digital powerhouse in West Africa with a landmark agreement signed with the United Arab Emirates. This deal will see the creation of $1 billion tech and innovation hub designed to attract global tech giants and empower local talents in the country. From Accra, Nadia Tete tells us more.
Ghana and the United Arab Emirates have signed an agreement to build a tech hub in Ningo Pram Pram, a coastal town in the Greater Accra region of southern Ghana. The $1 billion project will be fully funded by Dubai's Ports, Customs and Free Zones Corporation, PCFC, with the Ghanaian government providing the land. Once completed, the center is expected to host big international names like Microsoft, Oracle, IBM, Meta, and Alphabet. It will also support work in artificial intelligence, outsourcing and data development tailored to Africa's growing tech space. Ghana's Minister for Communication, Digital Technology and Innovations, Samuel Nati George, said the deal reflects President Mahama's vision to use innovation as a key driver of economic growth. He noted that the hub will not only attract investment, but also provide a platform for Ghanaian youth and startups to thrive without having to look abroad for opportunities. Mr. George added that the project highlights the government commitment to digital inclusion and skills training, particularly through programs like the 1 Million Coders Initiative. On the UAE side, the chairman of the PCFC, Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayem, explained that national wealth in today's world depends on innovation rather than natural resources. He said Ghana's strategic location and human capital made it a natural choice for investment in technology and logistics, adding that jobs in the digital era is evolving, not disappearing, with a shift towards design, smart systems, and customer-focused roles. For WDR, Nadia City, Accra.
Politics,
Analysis on major news,
social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Our guest tonight focuses on the election of Mauritania's former Minister of Economy, Sidi Outa, as the new president of the African Development Bank, AFDB. He was elected to the position during the 6th annual meeting of the AFDB, which concluded on Thursday in the Ivorian economic capital, Abidjan. Sidi Outa succeeds Akinwumi Adesina of Nigeria, who led the institution for a decade, characterized by high visibility and significant structural reforms. However, an important question arises about how can the African Development Bank strengthen its role in the absence of U.S. government support. Our guest is Professor Falu Sam, an economist and president of the African Trade Policy Institute.
I guess this is kind of a unique election. A unique election by the fact that I would say the underdog was the winner at the end. Unique election because also not only he won, but he was not in the, I would say, favorites, but he won in a very wide margin. And this was not expected. How do you explain this is that this election is unique by the context. This is a context of Africa, but this election was, I would say, shadowed or overshadowed by the geopolitics. Number one, the Donald Trump policy on public assistance, the policy also on the tariff and duties, And all of those have created kind of turmoil whereby people, whether African and non-African, within the bank and outside the bank, are looking for solution for a sustainable solution that would really pave the way for a more peaceful environment.
You talk about this current president being the underdog candidate before his election. Why did you term him as the underdog candidate?
I mean, it wasn't in the pronostic. It wasn't in the pronostic because, Adesina was from West Africa. He's from West Africa. Of course, he's from Mauritania, which is also part of the Arabic countries. And Mauritania also is not, quote unquote, that kind of big countries and all of those. I mean, we expected South Africa, even maybe Senegal or Zambia, all the literature that even in the media were really in favor of all of those, but rarely. But it had very intrinsic qualities that at the end of the day, beyond and apart from the geopolitics, I mean, also favored him because he was a leader in the Wadr Bank. He made very substantive progress and achievements, and that also was very instrumental in getting the victory.
How do you think the new administration can strengthen the independence of the African Development Bank amid plans by the U.S. government to withdraw its support from the African Development Bank?
Yeah, number one, and in a general sense, we need to count on our own forces. I mean, Donald Trump was elected to make America first, to make America great again. We need to make Africa great again. I mean, we can share the same MAGA symbol and acronym in this country. So when we have this, and the good news is that we have this new generation, we have the human capital, we have those new leaders like the new President Wadr, who work very well in the Arab countries, and is very well knowledgeable in terms of raising money, attracting funds, and all of those venture capital and all of those capitalistic instruments. So we can do that. And the good news also, as I mentioned earlier, is that now with the AFCFTA, Africa is really doing a lot of progress in terms of trade. And as you know, trade is conducive to poverty reduction, to really growth, and to make sure, especially for women and youth, to make sure that we have rejuvenation of our population, and that will make sure that we really do the progress that we want in terms of Africa.
Our guest speaking there, Professor Fallou Samb, an economist and president of the African Trade Policy Institute. Indeed, a lot has been happening in the world of sports, but telling us more is my colleague Augustine Collier. Augustine, good evening. How are you?
Good evening, Abdullahi. I'm good. And you?
Very well. I see you're excited to give us some sporting update.
Very well. It's a privilege to be here. So the stage is set for a thrilling football spectacle as the Super Eagles of Nigeria takes on the Reggae Boys of Jamaica in the final of the Unity Cup 2025. The highly anticipated clash will unfold at the GTEC Community Stadium in Brentford, London on tomorrow, Saturday, May 31, with kick-off scheduled for 7:45 p.m. This grand final brings together two dynamic footballing nations representing the African and Caribbean diaspora, promising a night of electrifying action, cultural pride, and sporting excellence. Jamaica booked their spot in the final after posting 3-2 victory over regional rivals Trinidad and Tobago in the first semi-final, which took place May 27. Nigeria, meanwhile, edged out perennial rivals Ghana in a tense 2-1 victory on May 28 in what was dubbed the Jollof Derby. And that is for the Unity Cup. In other news, the 2024-2025 UEFA Champions League final between PSG and Inter Milan will take place tomorrow, Saturday, at the Munich Football Arena. Inter were the first side to book their place in the decider courtesy with their incredible 7-6 aggregate victory over Barcelona in the semi-finals. The following night, PSG joined them by beating Arsenal 3-1 on aggregate. The clash tomorrow will culminate the 70th season of Europe's elite club competition and the 33rd since it was renamed the UEFA Champions League. It is important to know that the highlight of European football's club calendar is returning to Munich for the first time since 2012 when Chelsea defied home advantage to beat Bayern on penalties to win their first Champions League.
And exactly what you said, Augustine, what did you call it, home advantage? I wonder in the case of Jamaica and Nigeria, they are playing all the way in Brentford, London tomorrow. And the weather there tomorrow will be 25 degrees Celsius.
Imagine that.
I only try to imagine that. So I don't know to whose advantage is going to be, Jamaica or Nigeria.
I think it will be at the advantage of Nigeria, considering Nigeria has players in Europe. And so the weather condition will not be strange to them.
Well, only if they've been trading for long and they have built a good communication skill among themselves.
Great. Certainly, you're right with that point.
Well, we'll follow these games and bring you update pretty much in our subsequent bulletins. Thank you very much, Augustine.
It's a privilege, sir.
And with that, we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Maudo Diouf and Falilu So for their technical support. Do interact with us via social media platforms X, Instagram at WADR English, on Facebook WADR English Service, and stream live on WADR.org. Coming up at the bottom of the hour is a rebroadcast of WADR's Security and Governance Program in English in the Sahel, to be followed at the top of the hour of 7 p.m. by the brief in news brief in French by Demba Amaran, and I'm Abdullahi Hassan. Good evening.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM, New Me FM 94.0,
Hilltop Radio 104.7 FM,
and Veritas Radio 102.9 in Banjul, the Gambia. We also appreciate our listeners in Liberia via Alternative Youth Radio 98.9 FM, Lofa County.
Radio Kagama 94.5 FM, Nibe County, DCN